Welcome to a Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and this is yet another of my Stephen King Night Shift videos. A lot of stories in that book. And my whole purpose with this project is to try and cover everything he wrote or published in order of publication. And all the stories in that book that book covers almost every story he published from the late 1960s on almost to the end of the 1970s. So there's a lot in it. And this is covering the 29th work on my list of Stephen King's complete works, which I've compiled and done the best I can. And I don't know of anything missing. I'll gladly accept comments from anybody who checks my list on the Telltale Books website and says, hey, this story isn't there. It was published on this date in this magazine. This is the title. I'd love to hear stuff like that to help me get it to be absolutely complete. So anyway, number 29 on this list is a really interesting story, and one which has a really interesting history. It's a very well-known title, but not much of anybody really knows this story, at least outside of Stephen King fans. And that is The Lawnmower Man. It's a short story. It's only a short story. It's not a novel. And yet, a whole movie was made out of it, right? And that's how I originally know The Lawnmower Man, is when that movie came out. It was a big hit. Everybody was raving about it. Everybody was going to see it. A lot of good reviews on it. I watched it. It's science fictional. I liked it. I liked the movie, the first one. Second one, pretty much nobody likes, but the first one was good as a movie goes. And that's all I knew of The Lawnmower Man, because I didn't read Stephen King until more recently, when I realized so many of my favorite movies are based on Stephen King works. And I thought, well, I really should dig in and read them. And so that's what prompted this whole project. So if you only know the movie of The Lawnmower Man, you really don't know anything about this story, because for the movie, they basically took the title and the fact that there's a guy who mows lawns for a living, and that's it. Everything else about the movie bears absolutely no resemblance to this story. So the short story, was published in the May 1975 issue of Cavalier magazine, where he published most of his early stories. This was after Carrie had been published, but Carrie wasn't an instant success. I mean, I'm pretty sure it sold well, but it wasn't the blockbuster that we know today, until after the movie by Brian De Palma came out, and that really catapulted things. So this was published at a time when Carrie was successful, but Stephen King was still mostly unknown. And it's shortly before the publication of Salem's Lot. This is May 75. Salem's Lot was published in September of 1975, and Salem's Lot is the very next work after The Lawnmower Man. And just like Carrie, I've already read and reviewed Salem's Lot. I already have a video up on the channel, so it's in the Stephen King playlist in our YouTube channel. So if you go to that and dig through, you'll find the review for Salem's Lot. So The Lawnmower Man, I don't want to tell too much synopsis here. I don't want to ruin the story, because it is really, really different and really amazing. It is about a suburban homeowner hires a new lawn service, and the guy comes, the lawnmower man comes and does the lawn, but then things get weird. really weird. I mean, this is got to give the trigger warnings with pretty much everything horror and Stephen King. There are trigger warnings here. This is a pretty gross story. There's some body horror. It's it feels a little bit tongue in cheek, feels very surreal, and it is gross. And that's all I really want to tell you about it. Just the warnings for people who just can't handle that kind of thing. Stay away from the Lawnmower Man. But for everybody else that can deal with it, you got to read it. It's not the movie. It bears very little resemblance to the movie that was made. And it is really good, really cool, very well written, very well crafted, lots of imagination, different from pretty much most of what I've read by Stephen King, and different from pretty much most of the horror that I've read so far. I think I've said before, I never read horror aside from Poe and Lovecraft before I started Telltale Books, and then I started frankly started seeing other booktube channels that were talking about horror and starting to take interest in it. And that's why I've gotten into horror. My friend Samantha is the one that got me to first read Stephen King. We read The Dead Zone after she had read a bunch of other Stephen King books, and she really wanted me to try it. And I had just bought this really, really nice PS Publishing collector's edition of The Dead Zone, and so we read it. And I was, and like I say, I had looked back on all the movies that I like and realized that many, many, many of my favorite movies are Stephen King movies. I mean, Carrie and The Shining and The Dead Zone and It and um, Pet Cemetery and uh, titles Misery, Dolores Claiborne, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, Dreamcatcher, you know, um, and the one with all the bugs that come through from the mist. And I'm just going, well, all these favorite movies of mine, they're all turning out to be Stephen King stories based on them anyway. Even though some of them didn't adhere too close to the story, they were based on Stephen King. And so I got to start reading this guy. And so that's what led me to do that. And um, shortly after reading The Dead Zone, I looked for this really nice copy of Night Shift that I keep showing, and purchased that so that I could read all the stories in Night Shift, and read those and was just blown away. And I've read Carrie and The Shining and Salem's Lot in a Barnes and Noble omnibus leather-bound collector's edition, which I think is a pretty nice book for the price. And well, back to the Lawnmower Man. It After I read it, I was blown away. I felt it was very different from all the rest of the stories I had previously read in Night Shift. It was a really different kind of story. And I love that. I love that King was showing such versatility, and love the imagination of it. And Lawnmower Man is a top tale, definitely. Way better than the movie, I think, even though I still do like the movie. I'm sorry. I still think that the movie is good, but the movie is kind of standard Hollywood. And it's very much like they took King's title and the idea of a guy that mows lawns, and then they went off and wrote some other completely different story that has absolutely nothing to do with anything King wrote. But I still think on that first movie, for Hollywood, they did a good job. I mean, it's very rare for Hollywood to pull out something like 2001: A Space Odyssey or Interstellar or um, or The Shining. It's a rare day when Hollywood produces movies that great. Usually, if you want really great movies, you have to look to foreign cinema, which, I mean, Hollywood is a business. They're looking to make money. They don't care about making great films. A lot of the people that work for the studios care about making great films, but the studios themselves don't care. They just want money. They just want to stay afloat, and they're not interested in art. So, they can do good movies, but they're Hollywood movies. They're commercial movies. The Lawnmower Man fits kind of a standard, expected Hollywood format. But they did a good job with that standard, expected Hollywood format. Um, but the short story is way better. Get a copy of Night Shift, read it. And if you have read Night Shift, or if you do go on and read Night Shift, come on back, leave your comments in the comments section of the video for everybody to see. Any thoughts you have about Night Shift or Stephen King in the 1970s. No spoilers, please, but leave the comments, and I hope you'll come on back for a lot more Stephen King and all the other authors. I am doing a lot of other authors. Next video I'm putting up after this is going to be a different author. And Emily has been joining me. I'm making sure I have at least one video a week with Emily in it for the people that want to see more of her. And the people that have, there's one person that said that they'd prefer that I do them all. Well, thank you, but Emily is a valuable friend, and I'm not going to cut her completely out of these videos. If she decides she doesn't want to do the videos anymore, then it may happen. But as long as she's willing to do them, I'm going to keep including her as often as I possibly can convince her to. Anyway, the next after the Lawnmower Man, as I said, is Salem's Lot. That's number 30. That's already reviewed. Check out my Stephen King playlist. After that, Strawberry Spring, number 31. I'll be talking about that as my next Stephen King video. I hope you'll come back and join me for that and all the other videos. Until then, hit the like button, please. Hit the subscribe button, please. And have a good week or weekend, whichever it is that you're watching this.